there. Welcome back to Apollo Swattard Marriage and Family Edition.
Great to be with you. This should be fun.
You say that now.
Yeah. I mean, lively. Well,
it will be lively and fun. But as you know, we do the Fast Five. Are you ready for the Fast Five?
never.
Me
Okay.
either.
All right. Here we go. How about this one? What does a brain scientist do for fun? Like, what's your hobby?
I play guitar. And then I go walking in the mountains, between the fresh air and the birds and playing guitar. It's, nice way to spend a winter evening.
You don't walk through the mountains with your guitar? Like, this isn't like Julie Andrews' Sound of Music.
Oh, no. It's, and my fingers get cold out there. None of that.
And it would not be in tune.
It would not be in tune.
True,
Says my
quite
musician
true.
wife.
Yes.
Says my musician wife. Okay, here's the second question. Do you ever delight in telling people that you're a brain scientist just to get their reaction? Or have you ever responded to someone that said, it's not brain science, and you say, yeah, actually it is?
I got to use those. I'll figure out how to weave those in a conversation. No, I like to shock people by telling them I'm an ordained minister, and that really
That you mean that gets a bigger reaction than the brain?
Yeah, it's like, well, I know I can't be myself now,
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I used to tell people, I was a psychologist, they go, well, you can read my mind. I said, well, yeah, I'd make better money if I could. So I'll have to try the brain scientist business.
Okay, question number 3. What is one of your most fond memories from when you were a kid?
I loved climbing up in the mango tree and picking the mangoes right off the tree and eating them up there, and then throwing the little seeds down at my friends below that didn't know I was up in the tree.
That's great.
That is pretty good. That is pretty good. Okay, number 4. What are you reading for fun right now?
The Silmarillion,
Oh,
Tolkien book. Yeah.
wow. It's fascinating. I'm reading a book right now where they're actually walking through the same book. So I have never read. I've never read that of Tolkien. I've read the Lord of the Rings, but never read the Silmarillion. I'm not even sure how to say it. Silmarillion. I'll never.
Yes, it stumbles out of my mouth too. It's a big long word. It means the book, though. I looked that up. So it's Tolkien's word for the book. So I'm reading the book about the book.
It's really funny. There was this clip online where it had he had submitted a manuscript to this editor, and he used the word dwarves. I don't know if you've seen this, DWARVES, and they rejected the manuscript because they said, no, it's incorrect. It's supposed to be DWARFS, dwarves. And that's according to the Oxford English Dictionary. And he responded with, I wrote the Oxford English Dictionary. Don't tell me about what to use. Such an amazing figure. Okay.
Oh, for sure.
Question number 5. If you could meet one author and have coffee with him or her, who would it be and why?
Presume we're talking about living authors.
Yes. No, it can be dead authors. It can be dead authors.
Oh,
Except
well.
not a biblical character. It can't be a biblical character.
No. Well, at this juncture of our conversation, I think it'd be fascinating to meet Tolkien. He is, almost wouldn't publish the book because he didn't think it was good enough. Him, it'd be kind of nice to sit down with him and his little writing enclave there with C.S. Lewis and the rest. But I think I'd find Tolkien the most interesting. I'd want to ask him about some of his lesser known characters, I think he would never want to have exact symbolism, but he was thinking these things in the back of his head that just we're still trying to figure out.
Yeah, really such a phenomenal writer, and so many different imagery, so much imagery, and we could go on about him all day. But last time that we met together, we talked about enemy mode. In the book Enemy Mode, of course, it's gone out there. There are so many people that are reading it. People have been asking me about it. And as I got into this conversation with my wife, not that we've ever been in enemy mode together.
Huh.
No,
You
I'm
mean
sure
like
not.
this morning?
Yeah.
No.
So we thought we wanted to talk about enemy mode in marriage with family. This is my wife's idea. She goes, how does this work in family? And I thought, well, let's talk to the expert on the subject. So really though, let's do for the sake of review, let's talk about the three kinds of enemy mode. And then we wanted really to delve into how these three kinds of enemy mode work their way out in a marriage and in a family. But can you help review for us and our audience, what are these three kinds of enemy mode? What do they look like?
Well, lucky for you, I remember what they are. The all three of them turn out to be a way in which we're not being relational. The one that we notice first is what we call stupid enemy mode. That's the first one I noticed, and that's all of a sudden you just get full of some kind of emotion, and you stop caring about the other person is thinking. You just want to kind of blow them up, and some way get their attention. You say and do something stupid, then no one had a cell phone and recorded that, because that you didn't really want to have anybody else see you getting that stupid. And so I always thought the editors were going to make me take that word out of the book, like, well, we can't say stupid in a book. And I said, well, that's what everybody says. That was stupid. Everybody I ever met, that was what they said about it, was, well, that was stupid. The next one is low energy, and it's like when you just don't want to engage with somebody. You look up like, why are you here to bother me? It's like, sometimes we're just not awake, we haven't had our coffee. But this is, we're looking at somebody and sort of like, you're annoying me by being here. It's sort of a simple sort of enemy mode, like, go away and stop, getting in my space. Spanish has an expression, you're here to take away my time. It's like, you're wasting my time by your presence. And then there's intelligent enemy mode, which is actually when I'm figuring out how to make you lose. And we're having a little political thing going up here in the Rockies right now, and I'm getting all these notes in the mail and in the emails and stuff like that, explaining why the other candidate should lose. So that's an intelligent enemy mode, where we're planning to take somebody out. And I have to admit, I get into that myself with people, and often in my family, because and the way I notice it is I'm just waiting for them to stop talking so that I can tell them why they're wrong.
Nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with it, Jim.
You ever do that on the podcast, Travis?
I'm not going to talk anymore.
Yeah, we all get busted on that one. It's like, all right. The weird thing about the brain is it always calculates I won by the other person lost. If you just think about it, I don't know if you ever got in any fights or wrestling matches as a kid, but when you had the other person pinned, that's how you knew that you'd won. Mm-hmm. And so the brain seems to have that same formula. If you lose, I must have won. Even though I might come out behind, I might have actually be in a worse place than I was before, but the brain is going, yeah, I won. So even intelligent enemy mode is sort of stupid in one way.
No,
yeah, wow.
One of the things you wanted to know about, talk about that for a moment. You wanted to know about how this plays out in family. Really? Does it look different? Isn't that what you wanted to know?
Yeah, I wanted to know, just because of the strong attachments that are hopefully built within a family, can you get into enemy mode quicker, or is it a slower process? Can you refriend, like what you talked in the book? Can you actually walk up that hill a little bit faster to refriending? Even as you were just describing the three types, I was automatically seeing different things that have happened in our household with all three types.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have a teenage son, and so just walking into his bedroom as a mom, he's like, why are you interrupting
He's
me?
in simple.
Why are you here?
So
Mhm.
actually, I think we could probably better call this conversation not in family, but with our teenage son,
Yeah.
because he has all three of them pretty much 24 hours a day right now. It's
Mhm.
like, just pick your enemy mode.
Yeah, particularly with his parents, less so with his peers, but that's one of the wonderful things about turning 14. Your brain goes through and takes out a lot of your self-control circuits and then loads you up with over 1,000 times more chemicals than your brain has ever seen before. We call them hormones. That irritate the nervous system no end. And so he's running around with an extremely irritable nervous system. And so anytime you bump into him, it's sort of like bumping into somebody with a sunburn, whether they mean, you mean to or not. It feels like, why did you just cause me excruciating pain and instability? And just seeing you coming, your brain's a great predictor. It says, oh, here comes the source of my instability once again. Who are you who troubles Israel and all teenagers?
Wow, so accurate.
It is right now, especially. And then, well, even with between our son and us as his parents, but we have a daughter. I mean, we have two daughters, but our younger daughter is also usually in enemy mode with her brother. How does
She's 16.
She's 16. Yeah. And so the 16 and the 13-year-old are, we call them the middles. They're the middle. We have 4 kids. They're in the middle. And those two, if they start at the table, it's miserable for all of us at that moment in time. Is it different between siblings and gender and, I mean, in a family relationship? I mean, what are all the different factors that influence enemy mode within a family? And I know that's a huge question that probably takes several different podcasts, but just like a brief overview.
Yeah, well, the funny thing with families is they're constantly making, shifting, and changing alliances. And adolescence is a time when you're trying to define yourself as different than anybody else. Like I'm no longer looking for what I have in common with my family. I'm looking for what makes me different than my family. And one of those is your strategy for dealing with parents. So you get kids, and one of them says, "Well, I'm gonna do what my parents want, and that's how I'll deal with them." And the other one goes like, "I'm going to be so different from them that I'm not going to be anything like them." And then, those two, conflict about their identification methods. And, one thing about the human being is you're always trying to get everybody else to do things your way, because obviously we figured it out, and so it must be the smartest way to do it. But to get back to the original question, families give you the most opportunity to get into enemy mode because they're the closest to you. And so you really can't prevent it. Your brain, it's like falling down a hill. Your brain goes downhill into enemy mode extremely easily at the least provocation. And climbing back up the hill is a lot more work. So the question should be whether the family has resources and teaches each other how to get out of enemy mode. And that's where most families get into trouble. Because the American solution since the 1950s has been we have to talk it through. And so talking it through when you're in enemy mode turns out to be my brain is trying to figure out how to make you lose this discussion. So if you talk it through while you're in enemy mode, you have got dinner at your house with the two middles. If you have let's get out of enemy mode, then we'll talk about it. Now you've got something that the American system doesn't actually look for. And that is, how do we get back to a peaceful, joyful spot? Then we'll have a talk about how, now that we're out of enemy mode, let's talk about, whatever we need to understand about each other. And so, trying to talk things through in enemy mode is what we call having a fight. And, again, it goes down to trying to make the other person lose. And in marriages, you really see this when comes to get a divorce, I watch one family after another lose most of their resources and finances and all the rest of that, paying them to lawyers because they want to make sure the other person loses the divorce fight, when it's in nobody's interest to do that. So again, here's the brain doing its uninstructed thing. So the question then comes down to, how does your family help you to get out of enemy mode? One of the things we used to say in the men's movement is, your best predictor of your relationship with your kids, we'd say to the men, is what your wife says about you when you're not there. In other words, she is the interpreter of your motive. She's the interpreter of your mood. She's the interpreter of, why is dad irritable today? She's the interpreter of, why isn't dad here at your baseball game, or whatever it is, and how we are seen by the other members of the family becomes our way of getting out of enemy mode. It's kind of interesting. Kids at about 4 years of age figure parents do whatever they want. So I remember one particular case, a father was going to take his daughter out for ice cream. She was 4. And on the way home, he got delayed by a car accident followed by a shootout. So there's, he's hiding behind the car. So he came home and he tells his 4-year-old daughter, sorry, I didn't get here to take you out for ice cream. I was in a car wreck, and, then the shooting started and I was hiding behind the car. And to the 4-year-old, it's like, why would daddy rather do that than go to ice cream with me? These adults are strange because they do whatever they want, and that's their understanding of how the world works. So you have to interpret that. And, you've probably heard somebody say, you've never said it yourself, I'm sure, but as someone said, you'll understand this when you're older. You have to keep interpreting, as other people grow in their ability to do relationships, how things are actually working. And that's what gets you out of enemy mode. When you come home and perhaps your wife is annoyed with the children, and she might say, well, you take over for a little while. I'm going to go out and do something. It happened at my house anyway. I can't really speak for the two of you, but that gives that gives you a chance to get out of enemy mode. Somebody else take over, and usually you say things like, yeah, she's really tired. It's been a lot going on today. Like, you guys have really been annoying her a lot. You should probably go and clean that room that you've been told 17 times to clean, and you will find she won't be so irritable. This is how we have a rescue attachment, which is what we hope in families. But to have a rescue attachment, you actually have to be able to stay attached during emotions. And that's what most families have some kind of a breakdown. It's, well, we do okay when you're sad, but if you get angry, then we don't know how to do rescue attachments, or, so one of the emotions is usually the downfall of, we can get out of enemy mode until we hit this one. And there's 6 that are hardwired in the brain. So you have to be able to do all 6, or sooner or later you have one that'll keep getting your family stuck.
Okay, now I want to know what those emotions that have a hard time reattaching. I think I might know, but
we're trying to get them all back to joy.
Yeah.
So, do you remember?
No. I mean, I remember getting back to joy, but I don't remember what the kids' emotion are, because I feel like I'm in enemy mode right now. Because I'm like, I'm not in enemy mode, but I'm thinking of our kids.
The sadness,
yeah,
right? Disgust, anger, shame.
Yeah.
What am I missing?
Is annoyance one? Because that's anger. What I feel like the emotion my son has when I walk in the room.
It's anger.
Anger is actually a continuum. It's not a single level of it. So very, very low levels of anger usually come out as saying, I'm bored. You ever heard a child say, I'm bored, and everything irritates them? And it's like, so, well, how about this? That's very light level. And then at the extreme level of anger, you're in a rage. But so irritable is, I think we've got 5 so far. The 6th one is hopeless despair.
Okay.
So getting out of all of those will bring you back well, if staying in them, you'll be in enemy mode, but getting back to joy gets you out.
Well, yeah, more or less. Basically, if you remember when you're angry, I want to have a good relationship with you, you can get yourself out of enemy mode. If you have anybody else in the family who can handle it. So let's say one of us is angry, and because that's one of the common ones that people don't know how to handle. So I say, well, your brother, let's say, is angry, well, we want to be on your brother's side and be part of this family together. So let's go find out what's making him angry and see what we can do about it. That attitude towards, we're going to use this anger to solve a problem within the family, is enough to get you climbing out of enemy mode. Like, okay, we're going to see if we can work this out together. If you go, oh, he's angry. Now, what did you do to make him mad? And let's make sure we don't do that again, or whatever it is, and we don't use it for a relationship. We just say, well, let's find out whose fault it is. That's a nice way to stay in enemy mode. Because
would that turn the person towards the parent as in enemy mode as well?
Usually,
Could it do that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So if you can look at somebody and go, wow, they're sad, maybe we should find out what's going on for them. Then you're on your path out of enemy mode. It's like, well, I don't have to be, upset with them because they're sad. Or if they're afraid, well, I wonder what's scaring them. Let's go find out. I wonder if they're feeling hopeless. Let's go find out. And
that reminds me of being
curiosity.
Curious. Yes,
curiosity
curious kind of changes it and helps keep you relational.
Yeah, curious is an aspect of the highest part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, and so your brain is running pretty well if you're curious. So I use that one of my early determinations on something. As soon as I lose my curiosity, I know I'm starting to get in trouble, and my chances of getting into enemy mode are pretty high.
So that's why we do well, because I'm always more curious about you. I'm always asking my wife questions, and she's like, why are you asking? Because I'm curious. I'm curious because she astounds me. But it never goes the other way.
No. Some of us are just more fascinating, I guess.
I can agree with that.
Oh boy.
Oh, Jim, we need help, Jim. I was gonna tilt my chair back. We need counseling, Jim. I need help.
Yes.
Right,
well, here's the fun thing that we can all be curious about, what I think is the great leveler, and that is as Christians, and I presume we can talk about being Christians on this podcast right here.
Yes,
we can water that thought, can we?
Yes.
Yes. The question is, what's heaven's perspective on this? And Paul is always talking about, he wants not to look according to the flesh, not earth eyes, but heaven's eyes, and look at the other person and say, what is actually God doing in your life right now? And what is he doing in my life right now? And that's never obvious. But it's always the resolution to out of enemy mode. Because if you and I can't agree on which side to be on, whose idea should we back? Everybody who has a sensitivity to God says, well, we should at least be on whatever God's up to in the middle of this. So if we can find what God's perspective is and what he's trying to grow in us, and he often uses hard times and upset things to help us grow a bit. I wish he would give up that habit, but he keeps doing it. That gives us a unified place where we can all be agreeable. If that's what God is doing, let's get with that plan here. So I might not be happy about it at the moment. You might not be happy about it at the moment. Teenagers might not be happy about it at the moment, but God has our best interests in mind. So if we can get there and we have a family practice of, let's find out what God's growing in each of us today. What is he about? What is he going after? How do the troubles we're having represent the areas in which we need to be growing and stuff like that? And teenagers are really into growing, as long as we're at that. You can almost impossible to get them to deal with the past. because it's such a fast growing time in life that they just want to know how do I make it work right now, and where are we going with this? So again, it fits with what parents want for children. It fits what children want for themselves. If this is growth, this is going somewhere, I need to understand how that is and how it works, or, what we do next. That's sort of the meeting ground. And the better a family does at saying, okay, well, there's dad's perspective, there's mom's perspective, sister's perspective, brothers, those are all really good. But the one place that we'll all be able to agree is if we can get God's perspective on this. So let's settle into that. And then we can discuss our reactions to God's perspective instead of our reactions to each other. Now, just to make this quite clear, I think we all know this, but when the parents tell you what God's perspective is, you can be quite sure that the teenagers and above are not going to buy it. So having us tell them what God's perspective is might work when they're 4, but when you're a teenager, you have to hear God's perspective for yourself. So teaching people let's hear God's voice, and that usually means one thing: we have to quiet ourselves down. Now, when we're in stupid enemy mode or headed that way, the brain is too active. It's got to be quieted. So you have to quiet first. And if you're in intelligent enemy mode, it usually means that you're not quiet inside. You're still, you're uptight about something. You're not connected with God if you're in intelligent enemy mode. So quieting yourself and reconnecting with God. If you're in simple enemy mode, the most common reason to be in simple enemy mode is you're tired. And if you just take a moment to go, okay, I'm going to just relax again, I'm going to just quiet myself, and then I'll have another look at you and see if I want to see your face. Once we see God's face, quiet ourselves, see God's face. Yeah, I guess he likes her, or he likes him, or likes you. Okay, so why does God like you? I'm a little curious now. It's sort of funny because as I narrate that, I'm thinking about my kids, my grandkids, my friends. It's like internally, like, even in simple enemy mode, like, you annoy me by being here. So I quiet myself and I say, what does God do? Well, God likes them, like, why? What does he see in them that I don't right now? I'm trying to grill this hamburger and they want to know if I want cheese, it's like
yeah, as you're describing all of that, I just keep thinking this takes time. There are in-between moments, and having it all resolved at dinner is probably a very difficult thing to achieve.
Well, even as so I'd read the book the last time that we talked. So I read it last fall, and my wife has just been getting into it further and delving into it herself. And she's showing me some of the insights in the book, and she's like, well, look at this, do you remember this? And of course I read a lot and I remember aspects of it, but I don't always remember every detail. And she goes, look, you can't get out of enemy mode just by talking in time. And I'm like, this is why when we get into discussions, sometimes late at night, she wants to talk it out. And she's a night owl more than I am. Even though she's tired, she still finds energy at night, and she wants to talk it out. I'm done. My energy is gone by the end of the day. And I'm like, can we talk about it in the morning? And she's like, yes. And then she keeps talking because she wants to resolve it.
It's true.
And I'm like, no, I have to go to sleep, or I'm going to stay in enemy mode. And it's going to go from simple to stupid or intelligent, because I'm going to be mad in the morning because I didn't get enough sleep. Yep. It's learning then to recognize the limitations, and also like, I'm learning that's what she enjoys, but I'll tell her, I can't talk right now. I'm not there. Let's try to talk. And I put a time on it. Can we talk tomorrow at 10 a.m. if that's possible?
Yeah.
And that helps you.
Yeah. And then also like reestablishing connection. Like we both said, okay, yes, I love you. I care about you enough that we will talk about this in the morning. And then even as I was reading the book, I was realizing when I want to talk it out, I feel like the whole winning and losing thing, I've lost if you don't understand where I'm coming from. And that comes from past stuff in my life. And so I'm like, that's where my win-lose thing is taking place. So if you don't understand me, I still have to keep talking until you can understand me. And then I've won in this situation. It's very interesting. There's lots of layers.
Well, and what I try to do is to show her that if I do understand, or at least I want to repeat back to her what it is she said. You know, if she said, I'm struggling with this, I'll say, I know you're struggling with this issue. You feel like you've been slighted in this period of time or whatever it might be. And I want to talk about that with you, but can we do it tomorrow morning? And I'm trying to muster all my energy because I don't want to go into stupid enemy mode, because if she keeps pushing, I'm going to go into stupid enemy mode because I'm tired. I'm just really tired. And then again, it drifts into smart enemy mode the next day, or intelligent enemy mode, because I'm like, I'm really mad about last night and I'm going to try to get her to know that I was mad. Not that I would ever do that.
And it usually happens before I have coffee, which puts me in automatic.
I've learned she goes into enemy mode if we talk about anything serious before 10 a.m. and she's not been caffeinated or she hasn't had sleep the next day. But it's learning these things. I mean, there's all these things that play a part in that to make sure that we don't go into enemy mode. I think the harder part is not only it's when our kids go into enemy mode and then we have different responses to their enemy mode. And then that puts us at enemy mode.
Oh yeah, that happens.
Because with my son, I have a different approach to him than I do my daughters. Because he's different. The situations, and not only just because he's different, he's the third child. We moved in that period of time. I changed jobs, and we're in a totally different location. Some years have passed post-pandemic. And of course, my other daughter, who's the middle with him, she's reminding us that we parented her differently, and he's allowed to do stuff she was never allowed to do. And now she's in enemy mode.
They will certainly point that out. Yes.
I mean, and she's very good at it, which is why she wants to be a lawyer. She's studying the inconsistencies. So we can take responsibility for helping train her in that, because she loves being in enemy mode when it's in a court of law.
Well, then the winning and losing is real clear right there in that one. So it certainly is appealing. But let me suggest a couple slight redirections there with what's going on. First of all, while I understand talking it through and how that leads to winning and losing, and it's a very good observation. When we're talking it through, we're almost always talking it through from our earth eyes perspective. We're very rarely talking it through from God's perspective. And to talk it through from God's perspective, we actually have to find our best selves. So one of the things that really beset my wife and I was that I was a psychologist. And so when she went to talk things through, I would put on my psychologist hat and mannerisms, like, okay, you want to talk things through? Well, let me just facilitate this conversation. And that would just make her mad to no end, because she didn't want to be facilitated, It's like, well, what tools do you want me to use anyway? Then
I have a tool, it's called a hammer.
Didn't we just pay $50,000 to train me how to do this? And now you don't want.
That went over really well.
Yeah, so I'm sure it did.
I think pastors could do the same thing.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But here's the interesting thing. What we found out was that when she actually wanted to feel peaceful, she didn't so much want to be understood as the peaceful feeling that comes as a result of being understood. And when I didn't have my peace, having her talk to me about why I had taken away her peace didn't result with anybody having peace as an outcome of the conversation. I would predict if she keeps talking, I'll lose my peace. And she would predict that if I don't keep talking, I won't get peace. And so now we have a formula that's, bound to get us in trouble one way or another. So what we agreed to was that we really want to work these things out together. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to connect with God and get our peace back. So our best selves are going to have this conversation, not our most tired, upset, dysfunctional selves having the conversation. So I would say to her, don't try to get your peace from me right now, because I haven't got my own, so much less some for you. And I'm not going to try to get my peace from you either, but let's go get some peace from God. And then when we've got our best selves, we're going to work it out together. So on nights when I was tired, to follow your example, I'd say, let's do the thing that will help us be the most happy to be together tonight, so that we can get our peace and from God and work it out tomorrow when I've got my brain back. We found that it's actually an exercise that Chris and Jen Corsi came up. I know that you've had them on your podcast as well, but they called it the 3, 3, and 3, where you share with each other 3 things you appreciate about God from today, 3 things you appreciate about your day, and then 3 things you appreciate about each other. You may have to go back to when you were dating on some days, to find something. But, by the time you'd done those things, we could actually go to sleep. And even when you're tired, you're thinking, well, I, appreciate, these things. Starting with God, he's always got something to appreciate. Our day might be a little more uncertain, and each other's the least certain of the whole thing when we're lost our peace. But working that progression, once your brain starts predicting, you know what, we will get together and solve this problem using our best selves, then it's very easy to settle in at night and go like, yeah, I want to have your best self. I really want this to turn out the best, and I want to find my best self, and our best selves are going to work this out. Meanwhile, we'll let God give us some peace until we get there. That idea, we're going again into this, what Paul calls the post-resurrection reality. We're going to live the post-resurrection life now. And that becomes a practical thing. Your brain predicts, yeah, this is going to work. Then the idea that we can settle in before we worked it out becomes sort of interesting. I can still remember the first night my wife and I looked at each other and go like, yeah, it isn't going to work tonight, is it? And tomorrow it's going to work so good, so let's go to sleep. And I remember laying back on my pillow going, did that just happen? Is that real? Are we actually happy and we didn't work it out?
I love that story because, in scripture, it says, don't go to bed angry. And one interpretation could be work it out all night until.
Yeah.
But you find the peace of God, you find peace with each other just through gratitude and the 3, 3, and 3, and you can go to sleep. And the devil doesn't get a foothold.
Right. I had an old man once in my second church. I said, yeah, we don't go to bed angry. And he looked at me and he goes, 3 weeks. And I said, 3 weeks? He goes, yep, that's the longest we've been awake. I was like, oh my goodness. I'm like, you're nuts. Yeah. He just smiled and walked away. Yeah, this way is much better.
More than one way to parse a passage, isn't there?
That's right. And he really enjoyed that too. I had asked him, I said, how long have you been married? And he goes, let's see here. They've been married for 55 years. And then he wouldn't say 55. He would say 42 good years. And he would say 13 not so good years. And I thought, okay, wow, I wasn't expecting that either. I wasn't expecting. So as we're coming near the end of our time, you've helped us a lot. There's some of these things that we're looking at to see how to really get out of enemy mode. But you also mentioned refriending, and you referred to that as well. Help our audience to understand really what that is, not only to get out of enemy mode, but to refriend as a spouse with your children, because I want to get my son out of enemy mode, but I don't think he wants to refriend unless I take him shopping. Then he wants to refriend.
Mhm.
Just get him in the car.
Get him in the
away from
car.
the house. Go
Not
play
in
sports.
not in the morning. And then he's talking, because then he'll start talking, and then he begs for cheeseburgers and every fast food place we drive by. Hey, let's get that. And I'll say no, and he goes, no! He gets more and more mad. Oh,
But refriending.
so how do we go refriending?
Yes, well, here's an interesting thing about a secure attachment, and it's attachment you want to have for the rest of your life.
Mhm.
And first of all, the idea that when something goes wrong, we unfriend people, it comes from social media. It's like,
Right.
okay, now they're off my list.
Mhm.
And the only problem is that pretty soon you get relatives that are off your list because they wear the wrong color hat at the election, or they got vaccinated or didn't, or whatever the situation is. And we don't actually have a language for, what are we going to do about it? Is it desirable to go through your life eliminating everybody that you end up having a disagreement with? And that's actually becoming quite a problem for the kids that were raised on the internet. And older people just unfriended people and they didn't say anything about it. It's like, if you ever were not the first pastor in the church, you come into a church and you realize after a while there are a bunch of people here who have unfriended each other, and they continue to come to church, but they haven't talked, their families haven't talked in 37 years, whatever it is. And that's the actual dynamics that keep this place from growing or ever, getting out of where they're stuck. So for one thing, it's a language. We used refriending because we wrote the book on escaping enemy mode for a secular audience. It was a secular audience would be sensitive to Christians, but the problem is Christians are seen around the world as the people who unfriend people. They're the ones who get offended. They're the ones who can tell you everything about what's wrong with you, and they can't get back together with you once they disagree with you about something, whether it's gender or all those kinds of things that become end of a conversation now. Well, if you're that or you think this, we're not going to talk. So what is it that we would actually be talking about? And that's refriending, would be a secular word for it. Christian language for it is loving your enemies.
Mhm.
But of course, here's the funny thing, I was talking to a pastor in Germany about a month ago. He said, "Oh, I don't have any enemies." So I said, well, when your brain thinks of someone as an enemy, here's what they do. They stop listening to them. They're no longer curious. They want to win the argument. They want to be right. They want to, oh, he said, I got a bunch of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. So loving your enemies doesn't communicate very well. And then inevitably you said, but what if it's a real enemy? And it was interesting to me. I just came back from Ukraine, where I was teaching them with trauma recovery, and the Ukrainian Christians were asking me, well, how are we going to love the Russians? And I was quite serious about it. As Christians, we have to figure out how to love the Russians, and otherwise we are not going to love our enemies. And this is, and we don't feel like doing it. It's not an easy thing to do. So, again, most people don't think they have enemies. So since that's the case, we can't really use a term like, well, let's figure out how to love your enemy, when it's actually your teenage son after, you didn't give him a hamburger that's become the enemy, which is how it usually works, right? So well, do you feel like friends? Well, no. How about refriending? So now that's a bridge that makes more sense to us mentally to cross. Like, yeah, I got a lot of people that we're no longer feeling like friends, even within the family, like, well, I love you, but I don't like you, I'm sort of stuck with you. So how do we go about building that bridge? Because I actually think, Dallas Willard always used loving your enemies as the benchmark for how mature you were spiritually.
Mhm.
It's a nice one because everyone fails. But I've also come to the conclusion that it's the Christians in the parts of the world where you actually have to learn to love your enemies because your neighbor is trying to kill you because you're Christian, that actually get better at it.
Yeah.
So again, this is refriending. How do I look at you and say, you know, there's something inside of you God must like. Beats me what it might be. But if I could get God's perspective on it, I could try to bring that out. And actually, let's look at it this way. We would never be enemies if we were the person God wanted us to be.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah. Yep.
So isn't exactly the time I am most motivated to want you to be the person God wants you to be when we're in enemy mode? When you're acting like my enemy, this is when it would mean the most to me if you were to become the person God wants you to be, and for me to be the person God wants me to be in your environment. So there's this sort of paradox built in that refriending is to find in you the part that God would say, that's who I'm after. That's who I want to find. That's who I want to rescue. That's who I want to connect with. We can't connect with, feel like being with somebody else's sinful self usually. Like, you know, why are we going to refriend that? But do I want to refriend what God's trying to find and grow in you? Now there is something that'd be worth finding again, because if we can keep going back to that, we can keep calling out from you who God wants you to be, and doing that's actually going to call out who God wants me to be too, because I'm not necessarily going to feel like doing it all the time. So again, that's a way of talking about how do we find the part of you that that God loves, and remind you that this would be a really good time to be that that self. You know, that this is when it would be to both our benefits and to God's pleasure to become who he means us for us to be. And so that's what we're trying to talk about with refriending there, trying to find a language that, you know, will get us thinking about it again. And frankly, that's why brain science works as well as it does. It gives Christians a different language to think about the same things that we're sort of like, we understand that already. We know what that's like. So joy, yes, well, I know about joy. I heard that before. So, well, how about joy meaning to the brain, it means we're glad to be together. Well, never thought about it in that way. I was just thought it's a feeling inside. And so we rethink things that we would have, you know, left on the shelf. And that's why I think it's fun to be a neurotheologian, just to get people thinking about stuff in a slightly new way, and maybe we can get a little more nutrition out of it if we chew it up that way.
Yeah. I have a small story as you were describing all of that. I was at an impasse with my son. This was about a year and a half ago. There were like big emotions and stuff from us moving and all kinds of things. And we were not understanding each other at all. I mean, it was definitely an impasse. And in my frustration, I totally cried out to the Lord. I was like, I have no idea how to make this better. And please show me. And what was interesting, he didn't give me like strategies or words or anything, but all of a sudden I started seeing who my son was in all of these moments of like strength and courage and energy and all this stuff. And then I just started telling him, I'm like, this is who you are. This is how I see you. And his like countenance changed. And it was because of the move. There was a lot of stress with that. And I told him, I want who you are and who God made you to be here, not just back in that other state. And that's when he was like, I don't know if I can do that. And then like the conversation started, but it was all like God showed me identity, who he's made him to be. And as I just started talking about that, it wasn't anything about the previous argument and the words and the harshness. It changed it completely. So that, yeah, I didn't even know that's what was happening, but that's what happened.
Best description of refriending I've ever heard.
Oh, that's great. That's great. She's all happy now.
There were a lot of tears.
A lot of tears.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Jim, I know that time is limited for you, but I want to thank you for coming on Apollos Watered in this marriage and family edition. And we hope to have you back again to continue the discussion, not just on enemy mode, but how really our spiritual formation and what how the brain really impacts that. We need to understand, I think, a greater way. And we want to thank you for the work that you're doing and helping so many people recover from trauma, to grow in their relationship with Jesus, to understand who God is in a greater way, and how really they might become those best people that God wants them to be. So again, thank you, Jim, for coming on the show.
Been a real delight to do that. And yeah, I'd love to come back again. So blessings to you and to all your listeners.
Thank you.